Welcome to NFL Daily, where the big uglies are beautiful to us. I'm Gregg Rosenthal here with Nick Shook, continuing our look ahead to the NFL draft. It's been a big week. We did the quarterbacks, little mock draft, and now we're going to take a look at Nick Shook's favorite type of players, the offensive lineman, just like he was back in the day.
Oh, yeah, back in the day when I was a little bit wider around and yeah. I mean, I don't know how you're still doing all this draft content, Greg. You got 40s and free agents, and now you're over here talking. I mean, you're just pumping it out.
No, this is a week where it felt like we've been talking about, okay, we're going to slowly keep getting more and more draft content. And then, with 2 weeks left until the draft where we're at now, okay, now we're just going daily draft content. And look, the offensive line, not the sexiest position on draft day. Teams, fans are always a little disappointed. Oh, we drafted a guard. Oh, we drafted a tackle. And then at the end of the season, everyone's like, how come our offensive line isn't great? How come the Eagles are winning the Super Bowl year after year? So we got to do it, and we're going to make it fun by giving you a bunch of different categories, taking kind of the big picture view of it. This is believed to be quite a deep class, especially at interior offensive linemen, and the tackle class is solid. But like a lot of this draft class, it's kind of it's dealer's choice, where the very top of the class maybe isn't as good as other years, but it's very deep and solid, picks 10 through 70. So I'm going to just give you some categories. We'll try to hit all the relevant first couple of round guys as we go. And if we don't, I'll circle back and mention a couple. But you're the offensive line guy. I want you to start off with the category, what we're going to call the ultimate Shook player. Who is the player from this class on the O-line that's the ultimate Shook guy?
Yeah, we're years removed from me doing behind the offensive line on NFL.com, but make no mistake, I still am very fond of all these guys. And one of the guys that I'm fondest of is Oregon tackle Josh Conerly, who I loved his workout. I loved a lot of his tape at Oregon. And what I see, because the first thing I love in offensive linemen when I watch them in Indy or when I watch them on tape, can they move? Can they get out in space? Can they, win the battle of angles and to gain the leverage necessary to wall off a guy or block him? Not necessarily the road graders or the guys that are, just so physically powerful that they're overwhelmingly impressive, but guys that can get in the right space, because in football, it's all about winning at the point of attack and getting there first and creating those lanes for running backs. And I think that Conerly is this guy. He is this guy who's got a developmental side to him where he has the footwork, he has the athleticism, he moved swiftly through his drills in the combine. The tape backs it up, and it almost feels like he's a guy who is going to put on strength at the next level and become a complete tackle. There's a reason why, you talk about, Joe Thomas talked about this all the time, basketball players at tackle. You want the athletes out there. Lane Johnson is a great example of that. You have the frame and the athleticism, you put the weight on, they still have that body control. They become perennial All-Pros and future Hall of Famers. Not saying that Conerly's going to be that guy, but he is the blend of athleticism, of fundamentals and technique, and you add a little bit of strength and stoutness to him, and I think he's going to be good at the next level, and I'm a big fan of him and excited to see where he goes.
I love that you're planting your flag on Josh Conerly. So he is 36th in the consensus board, which is something that just, if you want to check out that website, it just averages all the big boards all over the place. He's 38th on Daniel Jeremiah's board, but he stands out to me in a way because I listened to a great episode of Nate Tice's podcast, Football 301, and he had his dad on, Mike Tice, who is an offensive line coach forever in the NFL, and I love the way he sees the position, and it was just hilarious to see a father and son. And he had Conerly as OL1, by the way, in the class.
Yes.
So higher than Will Campbell, higher than Armand Membo. He had him. He was a running back way back in the day, Conerly. So even if he's not an amazing athlete on player, he knows how to play. He played well against Abdul Carter. And I like that you're seeing it a little differently. I'm just going to be real. I'm having you be the expert today because I'm going to read a lot and I'm going to listen to a lot and see a lot with the offensive lineman, but I'm not going to pretend that I'm grinding left tackle tape. We're trying to give our listeners a good idea of the guys that they'll be taking in the draft. Let's do it with another category. Let's go most likely to be an all-pro first. So in theory, this is a sneaky way of me asking who would be the best guy in this class at any position. Not who gets drafted the highest, but who is the most likely to be an all-pro player first.
This is where teams swing and miss a lot, is that they go for the measurables. They go for, granted, he had a good year at guard this year, but they go for the Mekhi Bectons because they test well and they're just massive human beings. But oftentimes the fit isn't right. Or maybe the type of player isn't right. They fall in love with the fact that he's massive and he's a freak athlete, but maybe he's not the best offensive lineman. I'm going to go with a little bit of a catch on this one because this is a guy who's been talked about a lot, positively and negatively. It's Will Campbell. It's a tackle from LSU. And I'm saying he's most likely to be an all-pro first at guard.
Okay.
And this has been the debate with him, the length issue. Oftentimes it's like hand size. Maybe you don't see it. Maybe it's overblown. I see it with him. I see it in his tape. But he has tremendous feet. He is very experienced from his time at LSU where he started as a freshman, but he lacks that length that you need to win against guys like Myles Garrett, against those powerful long edge rushers that can have incredible bend and can simply use their length to create the separation where you never get your hands on them. If you're lacking that as a tackle, and it kind of shows in his tape, that's going to be an issue for you at the next level. But I think he has the rest of the tools in his toolbox to be a fantastic guard. Could be an all-pro guard. I don't know if he ends up with a team that moves him to that. I think that's his long-term future, just because I'm going for higher ceiling. And his higher ceiling is as a guard than it is as a tackle. Solid tackle, all-pro guard. That's why he's my pick.
Yeah, and also this is a class where there's not a lot of like projected all-pros, and he's 8th on the consensus board, and that's 8th player overall, not 8th at the position. 9th on Jeremiah's big board, so they're in the same spot there. Yeah, there's a lot of talk about his arm length, and you think about some of the great guards recently. Quentin Nelson, he did play a little left tackle, but ultimately he was a guard. Zach Martin played a little left tackle, played well. Ultimately, he was a guy. Tyler Smith, who's playing really well for the Cowboys, played some at tackle. And all these guys can do it, but they can be even better. And when you listen to Campbell in terms of the makeup, the reps, I mean, this guy has just played a ton of big-time football. There's a lot to like. And the thing that gets me the most about him in terms of guard, tackle, all this stuff, because a lot of these guys could be guards or tackles. Look at what the guards are making right now in the NFL. Like Aaron Banks, a pretty generic guard from the 49ers, just got $77 million over 4 years. So I'm listening to what Jeremiah has said on our show, 40s and Free Agents, and like, this is a draft, maybe throw away the positional value thing, because like, just pick who you think is going to be a good player. Don't worry if it's guard or tackle. And guards are basically making money that cornerbacks are making, like number one cornerbacks. Like, they're making a little less than tackles, but they're still making a ton of money.
And I think about what does he win with, Will Campbell specifically? He wins with his feet because he doesn't have that length. He wins with his feet and his positioning. And I think that can translate phenomenally well at guard. Let's think about the NFC divisional round in which the Eagles play the Rams and they're getting beat by stunts in the entire second half by Vic Fangio's defense, right? He's a guy who has the feet to be able to adjust to that, to be able to become a brick wall that you can count on in those situations, win with angles, win with leverage. I don't care if he's not that long when you're playing guard. And then you also have the ability to get to second level and really explode, open up that run game. I just think it's going to be a higher ceiling for him. And again, best player. Like, you're going to build out your best 5. I don't care if he's playing left tackle or not.
Right.
It's the blind side protection and everything else. I don't care. I want the best offensive lineman in the best spot, and I think that's his best fit.
Think about how the Eagles won all those games. I mean, the Packers, they made them look so bad in terms of their interior offensive line.
Yeah.
The Commanders, they dominated that game in a number of ways, but that was one of them. And the Chiefs as well. Like, really, every game they played, the guard position on the opposite team was a major problem. All right, let's go to a different category. Let's talk interior linemen. So this is where it really gets into the nitty gritty. Shook, were you a tackle or a guard? You're probably a tackle.
I was a guard in high school because I played next to a 6'7" like D1 recruit, and then college, smaller school, was a tackle.
Okay. Yeah, you seem like more of like a dancing bear athletic type of guy.
But
breaking down the interior offensive line tape. Look, when they're like running on the sweeps and stuff, that's fun, and the center getting out and pulling, like, that's fun. But ultimately, I think for the average fan, they're not just grinding that tape and thinking this is fun to watch guards. Give me an interior lineman that is fun to watch.
Oh, that means they wouldn't enjoy my last day at the combine every year when you're watching guys with long poles just getting excited about foot quickness. My favorite interior offensive lineman to watch on tape. This is a throwback. This is a classic. This is the highlights that you're going to see on your social media platforms because he's a bruiser. He's a mauler. His name is Tyler Booker from Alabama. And I was listening to 40s and Free Agents and listening to DJ talk about how he had slid in his mock draft because he didn't have a good combine, but he got some of that back at the pro day. And I think that you combine those two results with the tape. Big fan of him. But why I love him the most, oh my God, Greg, if you like pancakes and you like guys who are like Velcro with their hands, when they latch on and engage, they don't let go. Tyler Booker is your guy. He is consistently knocking guys off balance or planting them into the ground. He engages and does not let go. Once his hands are on you, you're cooked. You're going to be with him for the rest of the plays and just hold on for the ride. Guys are just getting launched by him. Like, I'm just laughing watching his tape because he just gets in there. Sometimes he'll finish guys off on double teams just for the fun of it, it looks like. There's one clip in particular I saw where he's in pass pro, and it's like a 3-man rush, and there's a guy kind of just floating, you know, maybe playing a little bit of quarterback spy on Jalen Milroe, and at the last second, he just steps up and launches him to the ground. Like, this guy is so much fun to watch. He's extremely stout in pass protection. He's got good eyes out in space, especially when he moves to the second level. When you get into him in pass pro, it becomes a stalemate, which is what you want, especially on those longer dropbacks, that they're not gaining depth, that you're holding that wall. And all I advise to guys who play against him, don't get caught on his train tracks because you're going to get run over. He's got great engagement, great drive, great power, and those hands are really strong. He wins hand fights all the time. There was another clip where they're playing Vanderbilt and he knocks a guy's hands down. The guy just falls face first in the ground. My classic throwback, big interior offensive lineman who's out to prove a point and finish every play with emphasis. It's Tyler Booker.
Love that. And he is 27th on the consensus board. He is 23rd on DJ's board. And so he's probably going to get taken into a good situation by a good team as a piece for a team that just needs some improvement to get them further in the playoffs. It could be like the Chargers. It could be, I think, the Lions planning for the future if he fell all the way down to them. We're going to talk about these teams, by the way. I should have mentioned at the top in our over-under segment. The over-unders have been out for a minute, and we just have some things that make us say, about those, and just some categories, some thoughts to wrap the show. But I love all that on Tyler Booker. He's a guy, some people think maybe he's going to be better in like a gap power type of scheme.
I could see that, but he's versatile enough.
Right. I was going to say more than a zone, but like, isn't every team both at this point? I mean, every team has to do a little bit of both. I do worry about this type of guy, although everyone really thinks he's a very safe, solid prospect. I do worry about sometimes the guy that you hear, like the first thing you hear about him is he just likes to put the guys in the dirt. I don't know. Sometimes those guys turn into Trevor Penning, and we'll see. Let's go boomer butt. I don't know. If you just lead with that, like, I need more. Then again, some of those guys turn into Quinn Miners. Who's been
they're fun to watch. That was the category, right?
I was gonna say who's true. The category is fun to watch, and Quinn Miners has turned into one of the best 3rd-round picks of the last 5 years, maybe one of the best guards in the entire NFL. So you never know. All right, let's go with boomer bust. So this doesn't mean you're necessarily down on the player, but you just don't know. And I do think offensive linemen, because they get drafted so high, the last few years, like linemen, tackles especially, just keep getting pushed up and up and up. And some really do. It's got a higher bust rate, I think, than most positions. But a player that you think has potential, but you're not sure if it's going to work.
Yeah, and I also think about there was a period for about 10 years where colleges were just having guys slide protect, and they didn't learn the basic fundamentals that you needed at the next level to really thrive, especially quickly. And we know the patience in this league is running thinner and thinner at multiple positions, not just quarterback. But we just talked about fit, right? I'm going with tackle Kelvin Banks from Texas. And the reason is, you said, well, is he, a gap scheme guy, or can he, thrive in zone? Everybody's a little bit of both. He's listed at 6'5", 315, but when you watch him move, because he's got so much of that weight in his trunk, in his lower body, the posterior chain, as some people might refer to it as, it looks a little slower. And he's very stout. That's good for him because he's very stout. But when he gets out in space, you see the desire to get there. It's just not as quick as some of the other guys. And as a fan of those who are very good at moving, it makes me a little bit concerned. He's a force of an offensive lineman. He moves as if he's heavy, but it's not too slow. The strike when he engages and the upper body strength wins emphatically. bit of a lunger in the run game. I think a lot of that is because he's not quite there on time, but he's got great eyes to get to the second level. He's just not super quick. So I actually had it listed in my notes as a man or a gap scheme guy as opposed to a zone guy, and you have to do a little bit of both, but it's fit. If you're a zone dependent team, probably not going to get the best results out of him. If you're something that's a little bit of both or more of a gap scheme, then you're probably going to have a better fit for him as well. So that's why I say boom or bust. He's a guy that's been mentioned among some of the top tackles. And so we'll see. We'll see if teams have the same kind of read on him and if they're willing to take a risk if they're not quite the same fit or not.
Yeah, 15th on the consensus board and then down to 29th in Jeremiah's board, that's a pretty big gap actually. So a lot of people who I trust seem to see him like you do, maybe like Jeremiah does in terms of baking in that they're just not sure that he's the type of guy that gets drafted high. He could be a right tackle. He could be a guard potentially, but a little bit of a boomer bust guy. I get it. Back in the day, the very cliche scouting term that would be in those Bob McGinn write-ups, which I still read them, and yet they're increasingly problematic. They would use the phrase like, looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane. That was like the classic terrible scouting term. Back the day.
Oily hips, bubble butt.
Yeah. Let's just go with like, who's the best athlete? I'm just curious. Who do you think is like the premier athlete of guys that we haven't mentioned or just overall?
Armand Membu crushed the combine.
Okay.
He put together a phenomenal testing performance, and a lot of the tape
from Missouri.
Yes, from Missouri. The tackle fits what you saw in the testing. He's really light on his feet. And the good thing that I really enjoyed about him is he improved over time. Like you could see a little bit earlier in his career at Missouri, he's playing right tackle. He ends up moving to left tackle. It looks like he's more comfortable at left tackle. And you can tell that he just got better year by year. He became more consistent. He keeps a really good base when he moves laterally. He's another guy who's addicted to finishing blocks, but he'll like take it almost past the whistle sometimes. He does not bite in his pass sets. He's willing to mirror, let you come to him, and then deal with his violence. And like I said, he had a great combine. He's got experience on both sides of the line. And as somebody who improved from year to year in college, that makes me very excited, given his physical gifts, what he can do at the next level in the NFL. So I think he's one of those first two tackles coming off of the board, and somebody that you're going to watch him walk out on the field. He's going to be an off the bus winner, but he's also going to be an on the field winner.
It's funny how consensus forms, because before I had on Nate Tice yesterday, I went back and I listened actually to like an early show we did before the Senior Bowl. It was the first show I did talking about the draft. And back then, Membu was there and he was viewed as like a late first round type of guy. Ooh, could he be the second tackle off the board? And then fast forward 6 weeks, and he's 7th on the consensus board overall, the number 1 offensive lineman, just barely ahead of Will Campbell. So they're right there. He's 2nd among offensive linemen on DJ's big board. He's 11th overall. And so through the process, and might just be talking to how NFL teams see them, people have realized like, oh, this guy is a great prospect. Maybe in previous classes, he wouldn't be quite as high, because there's been better tackle classes at the very top. But in the end, he's the most athletic guy in this class. And so it's kind of like quarterback. Even if he was maybe a prospect in some years that he'd be around 20, 18, it's like he's going to get pushed up because he plays the position. He's also very young. He's 21 years old, or he's just turning 21. So as a prospect, he's young. I really think he could go to the Jets at 7 because they really need a right.
As bookends. Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. They really need a right tackle. It's one of the only like screaming needs on their team, and then suddenly they have a really nice offensive line. You build them like the Lions built their offensive line.
Yeah.
Back when Aaron Glenn was there. All right, let's do one more category. Let's do a Shookie hidden gem.
Okay. So this is a guy who first landed on my radar at the combine because of the way he moved. Like I said, I'm going to sound like a broken record. Love guys who move well. There are just certain years, whether they're at the top of the class or they end up in the 2nd or 3rd round, where you just watch him on the field and you're like, that guy's different. Cam Jurgens was one of them a few years ago. Tristan Wirfs. I liked Tanner Bartolini, who is, kind of rising up into prominence now as well. Usually they're interior guys that show off a little bit more swiftness. And again, we're going to go with a guard. We're going to go with Joshua Gray from Oregon State. This is a guy who is so much not on people's radars that, like, if you go quickly YouTube search for a second, like just to find some quick cut-ups or whatever, his name doesn't pop up. There's nothing out there. But I'm telling you right now that when you dive deeper into it, He shows it. He showed it on the tape. He had a school record 56 career starts at Oregon State. And the reason I like him is because he's got the athleticism and power, and yet he's malleable. Like, you have the baseline athleticism to be able to get out in space and move. You have demonstrated power. Like Lance is right above him, was tough, strong, reliable. Well, I mean, those are all qualities that I want in an offensive lineman, especially in a guard. And he's versatile. He mostly played tackle in college, but he has the athleticism to thrive at guard, where he also ended up playing at Oregon State. So if strength is considered one of his strengths and he can move, I love the projection for you, the upside for you, given that you land with the right team that doesn't ask you to do too much. So won't be a first round pick, but is going to be a guy that I'm going to pay a lot of attention to because I think his upside is very much being slept on right now.
Consensus board 153
for
Joshua Gray. All right, Shook, he's planting his flag. We're gonna be tracking now Joshua Gray's career extremely closely, and Shook's name is now going to be attached to it. And I bet he's gonna outdo his draft profile in terms of 153. Maybe NFL teams will agree with you though, and he'll go higher. A couple just interesting names I did want to throw out before we take a break and then talk some over-unders. Josh Simmons is an interesting prospect from Ohio State, 25th on the consensus board, 35th on Jeremiah's board. He tore his patella tendon. He was the left tackle at Ohio State before that injury. Donovan Jackson, I believe, actually moved out to left tackle and was okay there, but he's going to be a guard. I might as well mention them together here since you're an Ohio State guy. He's around 38, 39 on the consensus board. Wouldn't be surprised if a team like the Patriots, one of those teams at the top of the second round that needs offensive linemen, he just looks like a good run blocker. He has versatility. He's going to be a guard. Donovan Jackson, solid. Whereas Simmons might have been a top 10 pick in this draft if it wasn't for the injury. There's also some motivation / character concerns being whispered about him, which you never want to hear, but it's probably attached to him as much as just about anyone in this class. And so I'm just curious, you're an Ohio State guy. Someone's going to take a chance on him at some point, probably in the first round, maybe even earlier than people think because of the position, but he's got the injury. How do you equate all that? Where would he be, you think, by the way, if he wasn't hurt?
He would be where he was prior. And I think that...
Which is what?
It's
top 10, top 15?
Yeah, you had him in the top 15, right? At least on the big boards, right? So analyzing the entire story of the 2024 Ohio State team, a lot of people overlook the changes that they had at offensive line. They had injuries from the midpoint of the season onward. It was on the interior, it was at tackle, and they just had to shuffle guys around and keep shuffling around. That's why Donovan Jackson, actually, he improved. His first game in tackle was not good, but by the end of their run, he was playing pretty well because they were just rolling with the punches. And I think that so when you analyze a guy like Simmons, you have a smaller sample size from the most recent tape, and it kind of complicates the picture for you. And you also have to question, how does he come back from that injury? Because that's no small injury. I think about Senator LaCharles Bentley, who tore both of his patellar tendons in the first day of training camp with the Browns, that essentially ended his career. So offensive line, the knees are important. That's why they wear knee braces. So there's a little bit of concern there. But overall, I think a lot of the tape doesn't lie. You just have to wonder whether he's going to come back at that same strength. And hopefully, if you're a team taking him, you're not taking him with immediate expectation. You give him a longer runway to kind of acclimate.
Yeah, and he's kind of the ultimate boomer bust too, just because of the injury and maybe because of the off-field stuff, but definitely talented there. I think we hit really the tackles that are probably going in the top 50. Another couple interior guys. Gray Zabel, if people want to go back and listen to the scouting combine one we did, you really liked him there. He's 24th on DJ's big board. Very athletic. Can kind of follow the model of a few good recent centers where he played tackle in college, but I think the league kind of sees him as its center. I love a guy that's that versatile. So he's another interesting one that might go off in the first round, and he's from North Dakota State. You got to love it.
The program is important because oftentimes you take your best lineman and put him at left tackle when you're playing, especially at the FCS level. But yeah, I think he projects to be a solid center.
Yeah, and some good recent rookie centers. Why am I blanking? Zach Frazier, obviously. And then Graham Barton, who a similar profile, a guy who played all over the place in college, but then they moved him to center with the Bucs. All right, that's our offensive line preview. We're going to be going through the positions as we get closer and closer to the draft. I always thank Shook for his expertise there, but I'm not letting him off the hook. He is going to be back after the break. We're just going to look at over-unders for the first time. I guess I have a sickness, and I can't really quench that sickness because I work for the NFL. So what I'm going to do is just talk about these over-unders. I find them interesting right after this. Back on NFL Daily. And yeah, when I said before the break I had a sickness, what I mean is, I find this stuff interesting, even though we're not allowed to act on it. I'm thankful for that. It saved me a lot of stress over the years. But when you see the over-unders for the year, it's one of my favorite shows we do before every season is we do a draft of what are our favorite over-unders. And that might be one of my favorite shows of the year because I'm undefeated 3 years running, and I'm going to keep bringing that up. It's maybe the greatest current streak in sports, where I haven't had one wrong in 3 years. And last year it was outrageous because I made a long list, and the long list over-unders were amazing. We're only picking 3 or 4. I think it's a total of 11-0, Shook, but it's 4 for. I'm 11 for 11. I'm 11.
Okay.
No,
I was
I'm
going to
not
say,
doing
if
every
you
team.
nailed like, what is that, 96 over 3 years? That's like Mickey
11
Mantle
for 11 is pretty good. 11 for 11 is pretty good. So
I will say this. I got to say this, though. On my other podcast, Gridiron Podcast, which you can find on youtube.com/@gridironpod, we do division by division season preview during training camp.
Yeah.
And we always do over-unders as well. And now you're going to make me go back and tally whether me and my co-hosts were correct, how close we were on those.
We might have to do that this year because I like having to take on almost all of them, and last year was particularly good. Okay, so they came out. I first heard this on Bill Simmons' podcast. I had no idea that over-unders would come out so early before the draft. It seems crazy. And the reason I find it interesting for myself is not the gambling aspect of it, more just what is consensus going to be heading into this season? We're starting to now... I hadn't really thought about it yet. Like, what are the season previews going to be like? What does Vegas think fans will see as like the most common wisdom and view of these teams? And so we're going to do this a few different ways. You have categories. I have one category, and my category is just going to be things that make me go, And the first thing that made me go, was looking at the AFC East. And if you look at the AFC East, the Jets have a projected win total of 5.5. And the Patriots have a projected win total now of 8.5. I think that's been bet up. I actually think it was at 7.5 because I listened to Simmons a few weeks ago and it was at 7.5. It's up to 8.5. And that to me is insane. Why are the Patriots 3 wins better than the Jets? So on going in both directions, I think that's a little bit crazy that the Patriots would be up at 8.5, same as the Dolphins, and that the Jets, like, I don't think the Jets roster is that bad. I don't think they got worse at quarterback. And I know they only won 5 games last year, and so that's why it's there. But man, them being 3 games apart just struck me as, that doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah, and rightfully so. I started taking notes, and the first all caps note I took was Patriots 8.5 with just question mark, exclamation mark, just a line of them, because it seems insane. And then at that point, I realized I needed 3 categories. I needed gettable, gonna be tough, and on what planet. And this lands in on what planet are the Patriots listed at 8.5 games, for the over under. And it all comes back to what you've been honking about for months, Greg, which is quarterback Drake May. And the fact that they had an offseason to inject some talent on both sides of the ball, support him better on the offensive line, put some, additional pieces around him. He's got Stephon Diggs there now coming back from the ACL, and people are setting their expectations high because Mike Vrabel's got that magic touch. He did it in Tennessee, and they think he's going to do it in New England. But do I buy in instantly? No. I need that proven to me. So again, on what planet are they going to win over 8.5 games in 2025?
Okay, schedule is a huge part of it, and we're going to get deeper into this when we get closer to the season, so I don't want to go too crazy today. These are just first impressions. Schedule's a huge part of it, and they do have the NFC South on the schedule, and so that's going to help out the whole AFC East. The AFC East also has each other, like the Dolphins and the Jets aren't like amazing opponents. It's not the worst division to play against. And then they play the AFC North, which is not as easy, but that just seems weird to me. The Patriots have won 8 games combined over the last 2 years. That's just a big bump. But what are you thinking? I think Jets over 5.5. That would be like a what are you thinking for me? I think they're better than that. Along those lines, I'm gonna try to guess like who was in your categories, and maybe you were thinking it of just like, can you get to that win total? Because this is more a win total that seems very low to me. The Vikings 8.5 seems crazy to me. That's so low. They really think the public is going to be that low on the Minnesota Vikings? They got the same over-under win total as the Bears. And I don't hate the Bears, but the Bears are at 8.5. They're suddenly the same as the Vikings? I don't get
Greg,
it.
I'd like to introduce you to member number 2 of On What Planet, the Vikings at 8.5. This is a big projection on the quarterback play not being there. And look, I understand there was some fraudulence with this Vikings team a few years ago when they ended up losing to Daniel Jones in the playoffs. And then, they tailspin at the end of last year, but that was a product of playing a good defense and a defense that Sam Darnold couldn't, sort out. And yeah, it is a big swing to just think that a team's going to win 9 or 10 games with a second-year quarterback who's essentially a rookie in J.J. McCarthy. But at the same time, this team got better in the offseason. They won a ton of games last year before they got these additions. How on what planet do they not win 9 games this year? I'm sorry, I just have a hard time believing that.
These two teams were 9 games apart last year. The Vikings won 14. The Bears won 5. Now, the schedule for the NFC North is very difficult for everyone because they're playing against each other, and the out-of-division schedule is difficult. So that's going to depress all the numbers. But, man, I'm not ready. I don't want to be making predictions. This is not what this show is about. It's just numbers that really stuck out to me because ultimately, I don't think the quarterback play for the Vikings is going to be that high of a bar overall to reach in the ecosystem that they have. And the rest of the team is really, really good. All right, give me On What Planet. Give me another one of your On What Planets.
The last of 3 On What Planet members is the Niners at 10.5. And
yes.
Look, I understand they were beaten up by injuries severely last year. They've also had an offseason in which you don't feel better about the state of the roster than you did a year prior. It's a bit of a transition time for them. They also have the Brock Purdy contract thing going on, swirling around them. And for a bit there, we had the Brandon Ayuk thing. So, there's some uncertainty with this club right now, just overall. To project them at such a high line, 10.5 is pretty high. It's one of the higher ones that you're going to see from any team in the NFL. I understand that they have continuity and they've done it before, and they tend to be like a roller coaster from year to year, especially when injuries get involved. But that's just a really high bar to set for a team that fell short of expectations, obviously with injuries being a big part. And then coming back from an offseason in which, they had some pieces leave.
Yeah, I think the 10.5 is a little crazy, but it's even more crazy that the Rams don't have it. So for some context, the NFC West plays both South divisions. They drew the best draw of any division in the NFL this year. So they get the NFC South and the AFC South. I think that's the ideal out-of-division schedule. So that helps push up all these teams. And in fact, the entire NFC West is 8.5 or over. The Cardinals and the Seahawks are both at 8.5, and the Rams are at 9.5. If you had just knocked the 49ers down one or flipped them in the Rams, then I get it. There's kind of a begging here of Vegas almost to pick against the 49ers when I'm sure the systems like that Cynthia has look at the talent on the team, look at the previous success and project that out forward that actually they're not going to collapse as much as teams think. And I can understand that. It just is really weird to me that they would be behind the Rams. Not every team is going to be over 500 in the division. So either the Seahawks or the Cardinals are going to be coming up short, or maybe the Rams and or the 49ers as well. Okay, so those were your crazy ones. Those were the ones to me that also stood out the most. Basically the Jets, the Vikings, and then the Rams 49ers split. Just other ones I just found interesting. The Bucks are at 9.5. I like the Bucks. They have the AFC East and the NFC West out of division, which is not the toughest slate, I don't think. And they have, of course, 6 games in the division. They're favored to win the division by 2 games. The Falcons are next at 7.5, Carolina 6.5, Saints at 6.5. That's one I can give a preview. I'm definitely going to be over on the Bucks. Now, is that going to be one of my top 3 or 4 in the NFL? I don't really know. But with that schedule and that division, to me, that's just one that I look at right away.
I actually felt like that was probably a game too high. And the reason is not that I don't have confidence in this team, because I do. We've seen that they became an offensive team last year. Baker Mayfield's played his best football of his career in the last 2 years with them. They have 2 talented receivers in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and Jalen McMillan really stepped up in Godwin's absence last year. And Bucky Irving had a great rookie year. But if you look at them over the last 3 years, they've won 10 games, 9 games, and 8 games.
I think they're better.
They've won the division each of those 3 years, but none of them were easy. And oftentimes they were the best team in that division, and yet it was still difficult. So setting it that high, I'd feel more comfortable in terms of like realistic expectation at 8.5 than 9.5, which is why I just kind of raised an eyebrow at that one.
Yeah, that one is that's why I wasn't in my top section. The top section are ones where the number itself seems crazy. To me, this number doesn't seem crazy, but I'm high on the Bucs as a team that I believe is now at a certain point in their cycle of team building that they're ready to go and that they're going to be a really good team this year. Other ones that stuck out to me, the Steelers at 8.5, which is like the classic, we don't know what to do with this team number, which is 8.5. The Chargers still, it's getting a lot of love along with the Broncos at 9.5, both of those teams. And then overall, no teams are above 11.5, which is interesting. Usually there's 2, 3, 4 teams at 12.5. So that's a little crazy. And it's partly because the good teams all play each other because of the first place schedules, and that even can affect that extra game, that 17th game. And then B, like the divisional schedules this year, I think the better teams are all with tough in-division games and out-of-division games. They just happen to be playing each other. But of all those teams that aren't going above 11.5, to me, the Chiefs not getting more than 11.5 is the craziest, because they're the team of them that out of division. They have the AFC South and the NFC East. That's not too tough. And then in the division, it's a good division, but you still have the Raiders there. It's not like the best division in the world. Out of division, it's a pretty nice schedule. So the Chiefs always disrespected at 11.5. Man, like if you bet the over for them every year, you'd be a rich man.
Yeah, this is a franchise whose fan base doesn't need any more reason to think that they're being disrespected. Let's put that out there first and foremost. But I also understand why it's 11.5. I would understand if it was 12.5, given their history of success. Great success, like historic would have been if they'd won the Super Bowl, and it still is historic. I think this speaks to the fact that we are before the draft and that there are still some concerns, at least what they've done on offensive line. And it makes sense to me that they would drop down a game from where you might feel more pleased with it. But yeah, sure. A little bit of disrespect. We still have the whole draft to go through.
I get it. Just here are the win totals since 2018. 12, 12, 14, 12, 14, 11, and 15. And even the 11 got their over that year. I remember it was 10.5 because I
12's flirting, though. 12 is flirting.
So, right. But again, you Chiefs fans, you're not being disrespected because you literally are tied for the best record in the NFL, according to
everybody
the odds makers right now. Bills were only at 11.5. The Eagles were only at 11.5. The Lions were only at 10.5. That's an interesting one to me. I think I would lean towards the over with the Lions, but it is a very difficult schedule. It's early. Just some first thoughts.
I got
more
one
in
more.
the space to come. You got one more?
One more in the gonna be tough category. Bears 8.5. Just because it's projection. Ben Johnson, high hopes for him. High hopes for what the Bears can be. They got their quarterback. Everything's cool. It's a lot of projection to expect them to win 9 or more games off the bat without... Again, I'm a cynic. I'm a skeptic.
Tough schedule too, yeah.
Prove it to me in a tough division. But 8.5, I thought that was a little high.
I agree with you. I've gone under on the Bears 3 straight years as one of my top 3 to 4 picks. And every time it's been right. This year, I don't think I will, just because I do want to believe in a world where Caleb and Ben Johnson just make beautiful music together. And I see the vision. I get it. I do think they'll be better. The schedule is going to be very tough, though. So I do think it's going to be a challenge in that division. Never a challenge when we have you, Shook. Appreciate you, man. Offensive line. Like, some people would look at that as like, I'm giving you, the dregs of the draft prospects. But that you look at it like this is the beautiful time.
You got to see me on that last day of the combine, folks. It's been a grind of a week, and I couldn't be happier and more ecstatic than to walk into Lucas Oil Stadium on that day specifically and sit there for 7 hours watching big guys in tights run around. This is my thing.
I'm looking forward to that. I already am now. I'm looking forward to the annual show that we will do with Nick Shook after the combine. It was fun this year, hearing your all combine team. That's it for today. Hit the music there, Eric. We will be back in this feed on Thursday. You know him, you love him. Daniel Jeremiah, 40s and free agents. We'll be talking more big picture draft. I'm excited about this one. And yeah, like when we're going deep on Tyler Booker and Gray Zabel and Josh Connerly, you know football is back.